welcome everybody to the meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on the 15th of August 2024. It's good to have such a good attendance at the meeting. We have no apologies from committee members. I think Katerina Kasper will be joining us very shortly. If I get thrown out of the meeting for any reason, Grant McCrae will step in and chair the meeting until I can get reconnected. I would highlight before we start that we do have a new committee member. Angela Leach has joined us as a new member of the authority and has been allocated this committee, so you're very welcome to your first meeting, Angela. But we've also lost our committee member, and that's Katrina Stewart, who's no longer a member of our committee. So I think with those comments, we could probably get started with the meeting. I should say that there were some approvals and amendments to the internal audit plan done via correspondence since the last meeting, and these are highlighted and will be detailed in item 2.1, so we have nothing else. So, are there any declarations of interest? Nothing? Thank you very much. We have the minute of the meeting that was held on the 9th of May 2024. Can I ask if members are content to approve that as an accurate record? Everybody comfortable with that? We also have an action log from previous meetings, and there are 3 ongoing actions that are due to come back to the November committee meeting, and there are 4 that are proposed for closure. Is everybody comfortable with the proposals in that report in the action log? Yep, okay, thank you very much for that. We'll get these items back in November. And before we go into the substantive items, can I ask if members are content to take items 6 to 9 on the agenda in private in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders? There's one significant item which is our annual report and accounts will be coming forward under the private items, just to highlight for everyone that we are required to consider the annual report and accounts in private until such time as they have been presented to the Parliament, laid before Parliament. So that's why that one's in private. Everybody content to take items 6 to 9 in private? Okay, thank you very much. And can I finally just welcome DCC Connors and ACC Stuart Houston to the meeting from Police Scotland. It's good to have you with us. Now, first substantive item, item 2, is all about audit and improvement progress, and the first item, 2.1, is an internal audit update, and that will be presented for us by Claire Robertson from BDO, our internal auditors. Claire.
Sorry, I didn't realise I was on mute there.
Thanks. I knew I'd seen you on the screen, but over to you, Claire.
So our progress report showing that our plan is on track and we're achieving all of our agreed KPIs. We've also, for the first time, included in the template here details of some additional services that we're providing to Police Scotland, just to confirm that they are not an independent threat in any way, to give visibility of those. On our follow-up work this quarter, we've been able to close 25 recommendations and confirm that 13 more are partially implemented. That leaves 11 which are not implemented. 2 of those are ICT-related recommendations, which Police Scotland advise they don't intend to implement any further. Those relate to prioritising demand and to effectively assigning resource. And we haven't seen enough evidence that this is implemented or is no longer required, and the risks still appear relevant, although, as we've included in the report, they're partially mitigated by some of the actions that have been taken. You'll also see that there are some recommendations in there where the recommendation was not fully accepted at the time of report, but alternate action was provided. We've given a bit of an update on those ones as well. The alternative action that we agree would mitigate the risk has not yet been implemented in those cases. There are updates and explanations against each of the outstanding recommendations, but if there's any questions on the detail of those, I'd be happy to take those.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for the report. I think it's helpful to know that you are still discussing with Police Scotland how to reach agreement on matters where there is no immediate agreement, and that we'll hear more about that at our next meeting in November. So good luck with those discussions. That'd be helpful to get that sorted out. So, does anybody have any questions or comments for Claire? Nope. I think it's really helpful to note that you've spent a lot of time at this stage in the year looking at getting terms of reference agreed for most of the audits. I think that should help get off to a bit of a flying start once those are agreed, so that's helpful. Angela, you wanted to come in.
Sorry, Mary, apologies for that delay. And yeah, and this is all very new, a lot of detail in here, and forgive me if this is something that the committee's considered before, but page 8 on Appendix 1 refers to demand planning and prioritisation for ICT service delivery. And I note that it's been outstanding since December 22. It's proposed that this item's closed, and that there's that's on the basis that there's a new board has been established, and I think it says something about it meeting twice. I just wondered, in terms of assurance, how much assurance the committee can take from the fact that this board is now established and it's met twice. Are we seeing, or are the auditors seeing progress in terms of prioritisation and resource allocation?
We have been able to see from those meetings that the remit includes identifying and viewing overall demand within the digital division. But what we've not been able to see is evidence of what kind of criteria or rules are used for prioritising that demand, or any kind of clear evidence that the demand is clearly prioritised at this stage.
Angela, do you want to come back?
So just again, so for my purposes, can I take assurance from the auditor that it is okay to close this off, or are there other risks identified elsewhere that will allow us to keep a watching eye on this?
It should be said, I guess, that these recommendations came from your previous internal auditors. So the actual underlying work was never performed by BDO, so I'm not as close to what the risk was at that stage. But in order to be comfortable closing off this recommendation, what I would like to see is it's more of the clear criteria for prioritising demand, and evidence that criteria has been used in line with the agreed criteria. So at this stage, we can see that there's intention to put a bit more structure and governance around how it's prioritised, but we can't see the criteria that's been being used to prioritise it, or evidence that that's been done in practice.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Lynn, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Maybe to help the committee, we could not close this, and so we can get the answers that Angela's asking and bring it to the next board.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Lynn. We'll keep this open until that one's been clarified. Happy with that, Angela? Great. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions in relation to item 2.1? Oh, Grant, sorry. Sorry, Grant, you're on mute.
I beg your pardon, I thought I'd taken that off. My apologies. It's just for information of the committee that at Resources earlier in the week, we had a discussion on the various ICT activities going on, and in relation to being able to do everything with a limited number of people available, we have, in conjunction with DCC Connors, agreed that a fresh view of all the things that are currently in train is going to be addressed, to see what is possible and what needs to be reprioritised. That's just for information.
That sounds like a very good idea at this stage. Jane, did you want to say anything on that? Sorry, you're on mute as well. Sorry. Hello.
Apologies, I got a young assistant for about 30 seconds.
Hello.
Hello.
Would you like to join the committee? Say no.
No idea what he might say.
No.
I'll just take you back to Granny. Just a second.
Okay. I think we'll just let DCC Connors try to sort out the mic and move on, and note that you know, Grant is saying these matters are going to be reviewed, so I think that's really helpful position for us. So all right, thank you. Yes, the action from resources will support this ask from ARAC, so that's great. Thank you very much, DCC Connors. Moving on then to item 2.2, which is the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendation Tracker for Q1. And we have ACC Houston with us.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. If it's okay, I'll start going through the dashboard that has been submitted. I also have Angela Wood on the call as well. If there's any further questions in relation to this, I'm sure Angela could help me out. But I'll give a summary first of all. And this obviously Q1 covers from April to June and has an overview of the status of the recommendations that we have. There's 326 recommendations currently open across 47 different publications, and to note, a third of all these recommendations have come to us since the 1st of January this year, so quite a significant piece of work. Over the course of this quarter, we've closed 38 of the 98 that were due for this quarter, but we've also closed a further 23 that have come over from a previous quarter. So there is a bit of a lag that we're experiencing at the moment, just with the volume and number of these, but we continue to work through them. Obviously, with that, we're not achieving some of those within the time period, and some of that is about trying to ensure the timescales that we can meet are the ones that are priority. And I think really to answer the action from the last meeting was about detailing those that were high risk or very high risk, which is detailed further in the appendix, which I'll maybe come on to. I think probably just to sort of highlight as well, we've shared this time again that sort of page 15 of the document is the quite robust process that goes through to ensuring that we are discharging any recommendations properly, and that's again through engagement with whether that be internal or with HMICS to ensure that we can fully evidence the action that's taken, but also the impact that it's having as well, because that's the important part. It's not just about clearing the recommendation, but it's the impact that it's had as well. So crucial to our closure. Again, going through the report, as was mentioned, the open recommendations that were high risk. These are detailed on pages 5, 6 and 7 on the report this time, with some rationale of what has been achieved with these and what the risk currently is in some of those. I would highlight there also is recommendations that are outstanding that are of a particular age, with our longest one going back to 2017, which has been a matter of ongoing work since then, and is in relation to a particular system used for the recording of undercover policing operations. Now, what I would probably stress for that, I know it looks at 2017, that's an area of policing that is extensively scrutinised and has been since that has been reviewed by the Investigative Powers Commissioner every year since then. So it's something that we're aware of that we need to close, but I would say that it's extensively scrutinised by another body as well. This time as well, if you may notice in the very last part, I think was part of the action as well, was detailing the summary of high risk recommendations, which is in the latter parts of the document, which is Appendix B. These sort of set out where we're going with these, the risk rating, the fixed target, and what we're hoping to do with that, particularly in relation to the status about preparing evidence for submission or trying to prioritise those. So hopefully that gives a better understanding of what we're trying to achieve. Again, a lot of this, as you know, is based on our prioritisation of the recommendations on risk, time open, and the timescales that we're trying to close them. And it's that continuous effort, and I must say, again, thankful for the engagement we have from HMICS and how we work together to ensure that, one, we're putting forward the correct evidence, but also we're able to lean in and seek that further assurance of what we're trying to achieve. So that's really a summary of where we are with the document that's been produced, and happy to take any questions regarding that.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Happy to open it to the committee for any comments or questions. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. And thank you very much, Stuart, for that very helpful run through the various items. I just really want to appreciate fully that you've got a huge volume of outstanding issues to address, but I wonder if, looking at the really old ones, the ones that you highlight going back to 2017, if we've got something that's been outstanding for 7 years or thereby, I wonder if there's a more pragmatic approach that we could take to sort of somehow or other address how to resolve something relatively speedily. That seems strange after saying 7 years, but basically to find a way of actually getting these resolved and parked in some acceptable way, rather than them just sitting there clearly absorbing a fair amount of time but getting nowhere fast by the sound of things. Any suggestions would be welcome.
I think and I notice Mr. Naylor has his hand up because it's their recommendation that it came from, but I think what would be really, it's quite useful to understand that a lot of some of these that are a wee bit older, some of them have actually been superseded in certain ways by other reports and other audits that have came in since then. That one in particular is a module for a system that has taken some time to put in place, and we're really keen to try and progress that, but it's that final sign-off part to make sure, one, it works correctly, and I'll probably maybe ask if Mr. Naylor's got anything he can add to that about the concerns that we've had with that particular recommendation.
Thanks, Stuart. I was just about to ask Mr. Naylor if you wanted to come in when his hand went up, so thank you. Nice to have you with us.
Good morning, Chair. Grant, I absolutely agree. We have done a huge amount of work with Stuart and his team to appropriately and proportionately address outstanding recommendations of age. So there's been a lot of work that's been done on that. The recommendations that are highlighted in Stuart's report, particularly that one from 2017, is a real challenge. This is not something that we made a recommendation without significant evidence behind it. It's a piece of software that is pretty much used throughout the rest of the UK. Bringing it within Police Scotland is something that will bring compliance levels to the same as the rest of the UK and bring that level of assurance up. Stuart mentioned the Investigative Powers Commission annual reviews of undercover policing and CHIS and various other things. They too, like us, want this capability to be developed and delivered within Police Scotland. I had a conversation with one of the team that are involved in that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, purely by chance on another matter, and they are really happy with the progress that's been made, and it is at that sort of data security side of sign-off. So we're hopeful that something will happen within this financial year that will sign it off. But where we can and where we see recommendations are being superseded by other matters, and the crime audit is a key one in that, we'll be doing a crime audit next year, and we'll scoop up the 5 recommendations that remain outstanding and probably address most of them during that. But this one about undercover policing, we don't want to let that go because it is so crucial to how you do business and the efficiency gains that will come from that. will be significant, as well as the data security and operational security that will be provided by it. So hopefully that answers your question about where we can do these things, we do. And Stuart and the team are doing some fantastic work to address recommendations very effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. That's very helpful indeed. I was just trying to sort of find a pragmatic way of moving things forward in general. But they've been sitting there for several years, because as Stuart himself has said, some things have been superseded by other developments. So if we could find a way of just pulling the whole thing forward as best we can, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, that was really very helpful. Thank you. Paul, you've got your hand up now.
Can I just prompt on this? Why don't we have a system in there that addresses superseded requirements much faster? Because, you know, it's superseded, but it still stays on the register. It strikes me as a little bit, you know, maybe a failure in our systems if that's the case.
If I can maybe answer that, I think part of this has been is where it's a recommendation comes forward from a new report that's very similar in nature. What we're trying to do is work by answering the new one that will answer both at the same time, because that recommendation is still sitting there, so it still needs some rationale to close off. And it's one part, as part of the sort of process that's detailed in here, and is looking for where the comparisons are. So maybe if we carry out one action, we may close 2 or 3 from different publications that could answer. It is quite a difficult challenge to make sure we're answering all parts of it and not just part of each of the different recommendations.
Or I mean, are these not just then follow-up requirements?
They may be follow-up, but also what they could be is maybe a certain part of it. For example, the ones that I would maybe use, some of the ones that were within the vetting recommendations, the HMICS review of vetting has also featured in the culture inspection as well. Whereas I think if we answer both, you know, in different aspects of it, we'll complete both recommendations from 2 different publications quite quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that would be good. And I think it's helpful to know that we're not just always doggedly trying to progress something, but occasionally we will see this potentially should be withdrawn or discharged, and then, you know, we can move on and clear the books. So, you know, it's helpful to know that that kind of discussion's already ongoing and everybody is pointing in the same direction. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments? No. Well, thank you very much, Stuart, for that. Item 2.3 is the SPA's Audit and Improvement Recommendation Update, and we have John on the line somewhere.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, John.
Thank you. This is a report really of 2 parts, and as you'll know, the first part is the SPA's corporate strategy update. So for the benefit really of Angela, this is the performance reporting of SPA corporate. For the likes of Police Scotland, their performance reporting goes to the Police and Performance Committee, but ARAC considers it for SPA corporate. So this is the first SPA corporate performance report for Q1, the year to date. So where we are at the minute, 72% of the milestones within our business plan that should have been completed by Q1 have been. And where there are actions that haven't been completed as expected by Q1, they've been reprofiled for the rest of the year. But at this point, we're still confident that all of those actions will be completed within the current financial year. And this is, like I say, our first report for this year. It's slightly different to what we've reported in the past. So now we're bringing out some of the highlights for what has been achieved, and we're explaining to you those areas that are being delayed or reprofiled to later in the year. Last point really to highlight on this is that following the HMICS report, which we're discussing later in the agenda, there will be changes to this business plan as we incorporate some of the findings from the inspection of the SPA. Just looking to the second part of the report, which is the SPA's own recommendations tracking. Again, we've got one new recommendation from that HMICS report. And otherwise, we continue to make good progress at closing some of the other findings, and nothing specific to highlight to members from that aspect of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this one? I think it's helpful to have the progress report on the corporate strategy, and that will be coming quarterly to us, will it, John?
It will.
Thank you. And then the it's kind of steady as we go on the audit and inspection recommendations progress, with a number being closed off and one significant new recommendation from the HMICS inspection. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Obviously, we'll be covering it again in more detail in a later report on this agenda. So if there's no questions or comments on this, thanks, John. We'll move on to item 3.1, internal audit report on your leadership matters. So this is coming forward from BDO, and I'm trying to find the papers here. We've got Claire Robertson with us to present the report, and we've also got Alex Hunter, Head of Leadership and Talent from Police Scotland, who can answer any management questions. So handing over to Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Leadership Matters is a programme to improve leadership skills in the Scottish Police Authority, Police Scotland and Forensic Services. And this report found that the programme has a really strong foundation in the 3 core leadership behaviours, and those were well integrated into the content and the delivery. A really strong business case was developed for delivery of this programme, and it was delivering really tailored training for different management levels in quite an innovative way. So lots of good practice is highlighted within this report, and overall we can give a moderate level of assurance over the design and operating effectiveness of the controls around this programme. So in the main, they were well designed, operating effectively. The areas that we found for improvement, or where we had findings, we felt that there could have been more consultation with the Scottish Police Authority and Forensic Services on the design of the programme. We also felt there was opportunity for clearer articulation of how the programme linked to organisational strategies and outcomes and how success would be measured. We've recommended development of a methodology for evaluating the success of the programme. And we've also flagged the need for effective resource management. There's a concern at this stage that as the programme is being handed over from consultants to Police Scotland staff, there could be difficulties in securing enough staff to facilitate the sessions and to keep the programme on track during that period. We also think there's an opportunity to make the governance arrangements slightly clearer, as there were a number of areas of overlap and remits between the Your Leadership Matters steering group and the strategic reference groups. So there could be some more clarity there. And finally, we feel there's a lot of recognition of the importance of leadership development, and that can be seen in things like the people strategy and the strategic workforce plan. But around the actual implementation and sustainability of these plans, we think there's an opportunity to develop more detailed timelines, resourcing plans, and a clearer connection between Your Leadership Matters and the broader leadership support mechanisms that are in place to make sure that the leadership development is a sustained thing and doesn't come to an end as this programme comes to an end. And all these recommendations have been accepted by management. That's it.
Sorry, telling other people they're not unmuted, and I can do it myself. So thank you very much for confirming that there are a number of agreed actions, Claire, and we'll be keeping an eye on those as you report progress to us. So I don't know if Alex wants to say something before I open it up to members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you to BDO, Claire, and your colleagues for the audit. We really welcome it. It's been really excellent timing. Yeah, I think one of the things we're comforted by is that of the 7 areas of the recommendation, 6 of them are already in our plan and have been for a while. But I think what this does, it highlights that we're taking the right approach, and it really sharpens up the approach that we're taking. So really delighted to see those recommendations concur with their own views. And I think one of the good things is, and I think you'll see this in the actual responses, is that 6 of the 7 are scheduled to be actioned and delivered by September, which is just around the corner. So I'm looking forward to being able to report that into this board in terms of progress. So yeah, I thank you for the audit.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. That would be really helpful if we could get progress reported as quickly as that. So good luck with that work. Are there any comments or questions from members of the authority? I mean, I think, oh, sorry, Katharina and then Angela.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Alex, so thank you for the report, Claire. Thank you, Alex, for the contribution as well. I suppose really, really interesting to read that. I thought it was a very good report and very good management responses as well. Alex, I think you to some degree have already addressed one of my questions, which is around obviously timelines in September, etc. But what's going through my head is, so September is quite close, it is near, so that's good. Now, is there anything that came out throughout this audit work that would suggest that the programme, that there's basically an impact on the effectiveness of the outcomes due to the areas of improvement that have been identified? So basically, I'm just really quite mindful that it is such a substantial investment, obviously, from the organizational perspective, not just in terms of setting up the programme and resourcing that, but also taking people out, obviously, you know, to do the training, etc. So I suppose I'm just looking for assurance that despite the improvement areas that have been identified, that the overall effectiveness of the programme isn't being compromised, and you're comfortable that by the time, you know, the September actions land, that we can be assured that the programme is delivering and is effective.
Alex.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I will say is the actions that are to be delivered by September includes sort of action planning around some of the points. I think what you're possibly talking about there, Katrina, is actually being able to measure the impact and effectiveness of the actual programme so that we can actually see the outcomes. And that's, I think it's against the evaluation methodology, which is already quite extensive. But it makes it really clear in that methodology that although we're going to tighten it up by September in terms of stating the methodology, an actual impact and evaluation of a programme this size, we wouldn't expect to be completed by September because there's still actually about 1,500 people still to go through the programme. We expect to see the impact of a programme of this size within 6 to 12 months after people had been through a programme, like in terms of full impact. And in terms of evaluation, that's what the methodology talks about. Like any training, when people go on a training course, they don't, or a development programme, they don't come out of it, you know, like the day after, the completely consolidating their learning. So that's what we're focusing on at the moment, is measuring that consolidation of learning. And with soft skills like leadership, it does take a very strong methodology to measure it. And that's what we're tightening up on by September. Your actual evaluation of the programme itself and the impact will follow after that. Does that answer your question? Or not?
It does. So check. I mean, just come back with a follow-up. No, absolutely, Alex. Thank you so much. I absolutely appreciate the difficulty of actually measuring the impact of something like this. I suppose my question was more towards, for example, if I look at the recommendations around the linking the current content to the policies, to the wider policies, and also the sustainability of leadership development. So I suppose what I'm trying to gauge is, whilst these are being addressed, is what we're rolling out good enough? So, you know, I would not want to be rolling something out that where actually we feel like we need to tweak certain things materially so that, you know, the current cohort going through might not be getting the full benefit of it, I suppose.
I get, yeah, absolutely. What I'll say is the phase we're in at the moment, we're very comfortable that it's the right thing for this point in time. A really important aspect of your leadership matters is what comes next. So our leadership development is not based just on this phase of the programme, and a really important part is actually what we do from now actually onwards. So people who joined that programme, say a year ago, and have completed their training, what is the continued programme? It will be different from this current phase 2, and that's in recognition of the moving culture of the organisation, things like the culture report and things like Operation Evolve and so on. So what I will say is I think we refer to it in our recommendations, is that we are currently now starting to look at what comes next in terms of leadership development. I'm really conscious that BDO put some recommendations in about continuing leadership development in their appendix, which was great. And, I think it was 10 suggestions, 6 of which we've already got and are robustly continuing to deliver. But there's a lot more to come in terms of identifying what is next for leadership development in Police Scotland. So what I would say is I'm not concerned about people who are currently going through the programme and making sure that they will continue their leadership journey. It's likely to be different from what they're on right now because the programme has to evolve continuously.
Very helpful, thank you.
Thanks very much. Angela.
Thank you. And linked to the previous question, Catriona, I was interested in the evaluation, and you've explained that, you've covered where we are with it, but it was also the link to the resources. There was reference in the report to not being able to do the focus groups and for the first phase or the second phase that we've gone through, and it was linked to, so how do we know whether we're going to tweak it or not for this cohort that's coming up and subsequent cohorts? And I suppose more of a comment than anything, maybe just for, taking away and considering, because I thought it was an excellent, should have said at the beginning, I thought it was an excellent paper and a really great initiative. Looking forward to seeing what the impact is further down the line. But in terms of impact, thinking about proxy measures that might give the committee and indeed the People Committee that reassurance that it is on track and we're getting the benefit of that investment. So linking it to, more input measures rather than the kind of output measures that you would expect over a period of a year, 18 months and so on. So disciplines, absence, participation in PRDs, that type of thing. So it's more of a comment than anything, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex, did you want to come back?
Sorry, I unmuted myself there. Yeah, I think it's a really fair comment about the resourcing. There was a resourcing issue in part of the organisation due to a lack of people resourced to deliver those focus groups when we had hoped to do them. That there has been a recovery plan put in place around that to make sure that does now happen. We did do an interim whilst we waited on that recovery plan being put in place, which did result in some changes. But we are pleased to see now that our strategy and insights team have got a recovery plan in place with us for that. So again, it was useful to see that coming out in the audit. And yet, really welcome your feedback about the measuring the impact and how we do that. That's part of our evaluation methodology. Really happy to share that at some point.
Thank you. DCC Connors. Yeah, Jane's going to log out and come back on again, so I think hopefully that will resolve the technical issues there. I think first of all I should really say that the report was a very positive report. I thought highlighted a number of areas of good practice, which is always good to see. So thank you very much for the report, Claire, and for the comments, Alex, and responses. I think that just as other members have said, what we're really keen to see is that, given the level of investment, but also given the importance of good leadership at this particular time, we're really anxious to see that this is effective and it delivers what we need from it. So all of these issues that have been raised in the report that you're taking forward and that we'll see in future reports are all very helpful. But you know, we I suppose we want to see not just effectiveness but sustainability. So that would be helpful if we could highlight that as well, because there's a bit of a worry, I think, now that EY are withdrawing their support for delivery, that there might be some issues around how we can sustain that ourselves without them. So I think it'd be helpful to have any immediate comments if you have on that. Alex?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was always part of actually the work we did with EY. In fact, it was part of the initial tender to ensure that Police Scotland, through the programme, became self-sufficient in terms of delivering this. It might be useful to remind us all that one of the reasons we went external to get a partner is because the leadership and talent function was quite undeveloped and at the time when we needed to deliver this. That's now changed. It's fully developed. It continues to develop. It's fully resourced. And we are now definitely capable and have the capacity to deliver that in-house. Like any organisation, we will have turnover within the team. And we need to make sure that we've got a contingency for that, just like any organisation and department would do, which we've done. We've seen that recently with one of our team that got a promoted post, and we already had our contingency in place to ensure that her role within the EU Leadership Matters programme is covered anyway. We've got a really robust backup plan. I think it's always useful for an audit to highlight that is a risk, because it is a risk. I'm very confident that at this point in time, we've got contingencies around that risk, and that Police Scotland do have the capability and the capacity to deliver the programme. And it's certainly part of what we've been working with EY, just as they've sort of concluded their contract, for them to effectively sign our people off as being competent to deliver it, and for us to also sign off that we feel our people are ready to do this on their own. So I feel quite confident about that. In fact, not quite, I feel very confident that Police Scotland are able to deliver that. Obviously, we have changing priorities, and if there was a high expectation, the leadership and talent team had to deliver something very different or very new, and we were concerned about the capacity or capability, we would be raising that with our strategic reference groups. But at this point in time, I've got no concern about being able to sustain this programme.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And on the back of that, I've also got DCC Connor's comment that it was a commitment from the Executive and the Chief Constable to ensure the resources and governance are available to deliver and develop this programme. Our leadership is essential, and the development of that in Police Scotland is key. So thank you very much, both of those comments. Claire, I don't know if you wanted to come back in at all.
No, I agree with everything that's been said, and that's in line with the findings of our audit.
Great. Okay, well, if there are no other comments or questions, thank you for the report and for the comments, and thank you, committee, for the questions as well. So we're moving on now to item 4, and the first part of that is the HMICS scrutiny plan update, and we have Mr. Naylor with us, so I'm going to hand over straight away to you, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'll start with an apology, which I don't like doing. We, for various contractual reasons, lost our website in the middle of July, which has caused some difficulties to us. We're hopefully back up and running in the next 2 weeks with a new website, but it means our publications and reports have been difficult to access. Not impossible, but difficult to access in that period of time. Hence, the reason for my apology is that it seems there has been a confusion on the report that has been submitted with the papers. The report is dated December 22. We did a review last year at this time, so August 23, of our scrutiny plan. I've sent that through to John McNellis this morning with an apology that I had only just noticed the date on it. So it will be available to be circulated to you all later today. However, I will take as read the fact that we have been doing a lot of work and coming before this committee and before the board on many occasions with the products we've produced and the actions that have been coming out of that. So I don't intend to dwell too much on the past, but maybe to give you an overview of what we are currently working on, and then what the next 6 to 9 months hold in terms of planning for a new scrutiny plan. So when I started in April 22, we launched our first ever 3-year scrutiny plan. At the same time, we had totally revamped our processes, our policies, and how we did inspection work. So we didn't have an awful lot of an evidence based on how long an inspection would take, the amount of time and the volume of work that would needed to be done. We now do. So we have a far better understanding that instead of the 6 months that we predicted an inspection would take, it takes nearer to 9, depending on the time of year with Christmas and other holidays. And part of that is down to the fact that we have changed our policy around self-evaluation, and we expect Police Scotland, the SPA, or whoever else we're inspecting, to provide the self-evaluation to us. We're very much guided on the questions that we're looking to have answered prior to us coming in. And we see that as good practice for a couple of reasons. One, to know your own business better than you currently know it is always a good thing in my mind. And two, it takes time to do it. So the delaying point of that for us has been worthwhile having, but has also been impacting on the length of time of our inspections. So to put that into what that means for the future, we have not done all of the inspections that we committed to in April 22, but we have done some other inspections that we hadn't thought of at the time due to either the authority asking us to do things like the forensic service inspection, or things that came along that became really hot topics like vetting, and then our organisational culture inspection, which took even longer than the 9 months that we now see as the standard footprint of an inspection. So where we are currently working on joint inspections on children at risk of harm, adult support and protection and custody, and you'll see those being produced fairly regularly. In fact, we'll have a custody one late September, I think the publication will be. We have great relationships with Criminal Justice Division. They spend a lot of time answering the recommendations, and it is a fairly regular battle cry that we're coming in to do a particular division with Healthcare Improvement Scotland to look at how well Police Scotland deals with the very vulnerable people that they look after when in custody. The response by the service has been very good on that, and we're very keen to keep that going. We're also currently inspecting Operational Support Division, particularly road policing, and see that as a publication sometime in October. Missing persons, without giving too much detail, we had our sort of final quality assurance meeting yesterday ahead of the report coming to the police service and the SPA for factual accuracy checking probably next week. It's a very good story. It's a hugely demanding story, equivalent of 900 full-time officers per annum dealing with nothing but missing persons. But they deal with them well, they treat them with compassion, they work very effectively in partnership with local authorities, with health boards, with charities to get people back, and over 99% of those reported missing are safely returned to their friends and family and home addresses. So there is a good news story there. There's improvements to be made, particularly around the back office and the IT provision. But in general terms, it's a very good news story that we will send to you next week and publish, I think it's about the 19th of September. We're also kicking off a conduct inspection. We've trailed that a fair bit. People are aware of it. I know that Lynn and I have spoken a number of times about that coming forward, and we will probably send to you next week the terms of reference for that to have some consultation on that, to see if there's anything we're either missing or there are concerns about. So that will be coming out. And then at the beginning of September, we start off on our next process of writing a 3-year scrutiny plan. So we will be coming up with all sorts of stakeholder mapping and exercises to listen to your views, to understand what you see as worthy of inspection over the next 3-year period, to link in with auditors, with Audit Scotland, with other stakeholders, partners, members of government. But most importantly, we are going to be trying to reach out into communities as much as possible to understand what communities and the people that use the services of Police Scotland see as being worthy of inspection. We did that last time. We got something like 200 responses to it. The majority of them identified as either police officers or police staff. So we want to get wider than that this time. So we've got a number of tactics we're going to use to get into that space. Once we do that, we'll publish that report probably the end of March, beginning of April, which will set our stall out for the next 3 years. And we will use the evidence we've gathered over the last 2 years of how long it takes and the resource impact to make sure that we don't try and bite off as much as we did last time and actually deliver everything that we intend to deliver during that period of time. Now, there will always be emergencies, things that come along to bite us that we respond to. So this is very much a fluid plan, a plan that's designed to allow Police Scotland, SPA, and government to think about what happens next, but recognising that sometimes we do need to respond in a different direction. So, Chair, that was all I really wanted to talk about in terms of the scrutiny plan. The final thing I really wanted to touch on was the team within Police Scotland HMICS liaison team work incredibly hard to do what Grant mentioned earlier on, which is to look at the older recommendations, get them written off where it's appropriate, provide the evidence and put it in a shape that we can all agree to. And the process works. They work incredibly hard and we've got a very good relationship with them. So I'd like to thank them for all of their efforts in making a tricky process as simple as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much for those last remarks. It's always good to know that the relationships are sound and that they are productive. So thank you for that. We have just had circulated to us your updated scrutiny plan. So we will be able to look at that, now that we have it. And if there are any questions or comments, we'll get back to you with those. But I think you've given us an oral update on the plan and on the current experiences, and very helpfully a note of everything that we can expect to receive in the next few weeks and months. And that, these sound like a set of reports which will be extremely valuable to us. So looking forward to seeing those. So I'll just open it up now to questions from members of the committee. Any comments, any questions? Angela.
It's more of a comment. Thanks for this, Craig. It reads really well and it's really reassuring just to see the extent of the reviews that you're undertaking. Just to say that in terms of public consultation, as part of the community empowerment legislation, most local areas have something equivalent to local area partnerships, and by and large they've got quite broad representation from community groups and members. And I just wonder if it might be worthwhile tapping into that when you're doing your consultation on your future plan.
Thanks, Angela. It's one of the things we're looking at. We're speaking to COSLA, I think it's next week actually, about how we utilise particularly things like the chair of Local Scrutiny Partnerships board to get the message out. But that's another good area that we'll look at and try and make sure that we get into as many of those groups that can extend our reach as possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, anything that helps streamline that consultation is to be welcomed. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? I don't think so. In which case, we'll wish you luck with the implementation of that plan, Craig, but also sympathise with you for the loss of your website. I can't imagine how that must have felt, not to have had your website for a few months. That's pretty horrible. So hopefully that's back up and running soon and you can get back to normal. So next item is also from yourself, Craig, is the inspection of SPA Corporate by HMICS. This is our first opportunity to air this report in public at the authority, so happy to hand over to you for that. Thank
you very much, Chair. I've also got Dr. Annie Crowley with me, who is on the call. Annie led the majority of this work, and I've got to say, I may bring her in at some point because she's got better knowledge of the detail than I do. But to be honest, moving from where we were in 2019 when we published the last report into the SPA to where we are now, it's a totally different organisation. And I think it's only fair to pull out a couple of things. Lynn Brown and Martin Evans' leadership in this is absolutely exemplary in moving the organisation to much more open, transparent, focused on delivering what the legislation requires of the SPA and delivering a police service for Scotland. So the support that we've had from Lynn and Martin, but also from the likes of John McNellis and others in doing this work has been fantastic. There was a real openness to this inspection. There was a candour in every conversation. There was a real appetite for learning and developing, which we see as a really healthy organisation. Now, the big thing for us, and I won't go into the detail of the report because you've all had the chance to read it. The big thing for us is we made one recommendation, which was to have consideration of the 17 areas for development. We didn't make a particular recommendation about any one thing, which is unheard of for us. You know that 326 recommendations for Police Scotland is kind of par for the course, but we normally make recommendations that are big ticket, strategic type items. On this occasion, we're looking for nudge issues rather than big change issues. And I think that is testament to the work that's been done to change the shape, direction and nature of the organisation. So we see that as a really positive that we haven't had to make recommendations. Just to run through very briefly what we've done. This was very much predicated on a self-assessment conducted by the SPA. We then did a managed look at that self-assessment with support from Audit Scotland. We did this for a number of reasons. We enjoy and particularly see the benefit of collaboratively working with other scrutiny bodies, you know, a la CRERA, and we'll be continuing to do this in coming years and months. Bringing in Audit Scotland's expertise was very useful. It provided us with a challenge to our own thinking and our own processes, but also allowed them to bring their audit experience into looking at what the SPA gave to us on the managed self-assessment. All of the previous recommendations from previous inspections have been closed. That in itself is a very positive statement. We really recognise and warmly welcome the extent to which SPA are looking at self-evaluation, are understanding their best value duties, and I think John will be talking about that after me, but there is a strong leadership vision and direction that has really been set out and is now being worked towards in all of this area, which is ideal. The range of partnerships within that the SPA engages with are really wide, and some of the time we have maybe asked a question about why and what is the outcome you're going to deliver with that partnership. Sometimes it's about advocacy, sometimes it's about wider than that advocacy, and we want to just maybe encourage a bit of thinking about the next iteration of your engagement strategy, answering that's a why question sometimes, and being a bit more elaborate on how you describe what you're going to do with it. We welcome the fact that the majority of your business is done in public, like this meeting, and recognise that there are times that things should be done in private. Articulating, as you did this morning, Chair, why you're taking the matters this afternoon in private, or later on today in private, I think is a really positive step, because it gives that transparency of why and what particular reason you're using to keep that in private. We really welcome that, because we see that change over the last sort of 18 months in virtually all of the committee's meetings and the SPA board meetings. One of the things that we did look at that I'm keen continues to be a focus of the sort of effectiveness of the board is how Police Scotland are scrutinised and how you continue to demonstrate that consistent focus on outcomes. We've heard it this morning a number of times about that focus on outcomes. The wider bit for me will be about the focus on benefits in the change process, and DCC Connors and I have spoken about this many times, about how do you get to a point of understanding the inputs that you're having on it, the outputs you're delivering, but at the end of the day, when you've actually achieved the benefit of the change process. So having that as a thought process within SPA board and committees, we see as developing, getting stronger, and certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, much better than it has been. But I think it can continue to get more intrusive and more robust at the same time as being more supportive of Police Scotland. It's a challenging one, it's difficult, it's not easy, but I think there is value to be had in that space. We talked about the medium-term financial strategy, but do recognise the fact that you are funded year to year, and that is a continuing challenge. We are keen that there is, with the current settlement and potential for future settlements, that the government come to a position where they can give you indicative, if not definitive, positions of what money might look like, and how you then shape the organisation through the new model of policing work to get to a position where the longer term strategies are more effective at delivering the outcomes that you expect to deliver. But we recognise that there is an awful lot of imprecise information, and that you are not masters of that in your own right. We've talked about performance management, and I know John spoke earlier on about performance management of the SPA, and we're very receptive to the work that's been done in that space and see that's improved. We're also aware that the Policing Performance Committee have put a lot of time and effort into Police Scotland's performance, and that the new performance framework is coming from the service. So a moving picture, but one we think is moving in the right direction, and we're very supportive of that. And I think, Chair, that is about all I really wanted to cover. Annie, I don't know if there's anything that you want to cover that I may have missed in my rush through that.
No, I don't think so, but yeah, happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both. I think I can say without question that the report we received was invaluable, but I actually think the process of getting to the report, the pulling together of the self-evaluation, the work that we did to look at ourselves carefully, whether that was in committees or in the board, was also invaluable. And I also wanted to thank you for the comments you made about the leadership within the authority, and to agree that without the leadership of both Martin and Lynn, we might not have made the progress that we clearly have since 2019. I remember 2019, and this is a very different experience. So thank you very much for the clarity of your report, for the helpful comments that you've made today, and for the collaborative way in which the inspection was carried out. And we've got a product now that we can really make use of. So thank you very much for that. Open it up to members of the committee for any comments or questions. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. Craig, thank you very much indeed for the report and the presentation of it, and I would endorse the comments that our Chair has just made. I'd just like to mention that in relation to the longer term planning on the financial front, at the Resources Committee earlier this week, we were particularly focused on looking at not just the budget planning for 25-26, but encouraging a 5-year horizon, both on capital and reform, but also the revenue implications of the timing of these capital investments. We know that it's not very easy to get Scottish Government to commit to a longer term horizon, but very much support. Even an indicative figure every year would actually make a big difference to the forward planning, which we think is key to the future of the authority. So it was just worth mentioning that that's been very much on our agenda too.
Yes, Craig.
Thank you. I've not managed to see all of that committee meeting. I've watched bits of it, but no, I absolutely agree that the drive to make that happen is there, Grant, and we're really supportive of that. The bit for me is about getting other partners into that space as well, and recognising not so much how it makes it easier for you, but how you can actually track your performance and your capability against the money you've got. So yeah, we think that's a really strong step forward, but in a challenging space. So we don't underestimate how difficult that is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if I just add that, you know, for any other organisation this size elsewhere, you would expect to see a much longer planning horizon to make things happen. A lot of the things that are trying to be done can't be done overnight. And there needs to be the confidence that the funding is going to be there at the right time to be able to do it. So thank you very much. I think we're very much on the same page.
Yes, thank you, Grant. Any other comments or questions? In which case, thank you again then for the report. I'm now going to give Lynn an opportunity to present the SPA's response to the report, which is item 4.3 on our agenda. So over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just say a few words and then I'll pass over to John, who's done in his usual exemplary style a really, really good deck for it to take you through how we approach the inspection and the outcomes. Can I just say a few words? First of all, thank you to Mr. Naylor for those very kind comments that he made about the leadership. I must say a bit more about that. When I joined the SPA, I actually joined the day the last report landed, the HMICS. I was an interim and it landed, and I remember thinking, wow, I didn't know this. And I'm really pleased with the progress we have made. Can I say, however, that there's a number of aspects to that. First of all, it's the whole board. It's been a whole board approach to the leadership, and in particular, the view on what is in the public interest. What seemed to happen before was a lot of internal wranglings and internal navel gazing, and that this board has been very clear on what is the public interest. You see that as your role in holding Chief Constable to account, and that is done with professionalism and commitment, and I welcome that. And also in terms of relationships, the relationships the authority has now with Police Scotland, and I think a very professional, candid way as well, with COSLA. We were criticised before for that, and I'd like to thank all the staff that have developed that, and also with other key partners such as SPARC and the Scottish Government. So there's been a whole relationship approach to what we do. But again, I'd like to stress the leadership is the whole board, and I thank you for that. In terms of, before I pass to John, what you will see is there is one recommendation, as Mr. Naylor said, but there's 17 areas for improvement, and I think you'll be assured to see that we're already taking those all forward, and our proposal is to integrate that into our corporate strategy. So you will be updated that on a quarterly basis. So I'd just like to move over to John with your indulgence, Chair, if that's okay. Okay. John,
yes.
Present, please.
Thank you both. I think really reiterating what Craig was saying earlier, that this audit or inspection felt quite different. It really was quite collaborative throughout, from talking about the terms of reference and how we did our self-assessment. So I really welcomed that from Annie and the rest of the team. We certainly felt audited. There was a lot of work throughout, but I think we managed to develop quite a good relationship throughout, where we could have those, good conversations about how we're doing something, how it could be improved. So that was really welcomed. So just maybe touching on some of the background, and again, we collaborated and discussed how we would do this to effectively split our self-evaluation and the audit or inspection approach into 3 areas. So the first of that being our best value self-assessment, which HMICS used as, like I said, a validated self-assessment, and we considered the Scottish Government's accountable officer guidance on best value, where we did lots of workshops and had a lot of evidence to have a view on the SPA and our role and how we're performing and continually improving over time. The second aspect looked quite specifically at the board and the members, and we did again an evaluation against the Scottish Government's on-board guidance, and we're very pleased to see that the report concluded that there were no instances of members acting out with their remit, which was quite a good development from 2019. And then the last part almost brought everything together, where we did an evaluation of that journey from 2019 to now, to really explain all the improvements and the developments that we've made, which I think gave us a lot of comfort. pull together the number of improvements that have happened over time. So there was a lot of work, and I think you can see that in the timescale that this preparation and planning process has really been a year of our lives. It's been a lot of work, which is why I say we certainly felt audited throughout, and we were pleased with the findings that you see in front of you. In particular, most of those areas of development were all things that we recognised and we agreed with, and in fact, much of them are already within our business plan. Our approach to dealing with the report and the findings, again, we agreed with Annie and others. Effectively, we discussed that there's not particularly a need for a separate action plan specifically for this inspection. What we're wanting to do and what we've agreed is that we will map each of the areas of development to our existing business plan. Some of those findings are already in there anyway. It's a case of enhancing them, adding to them, or adding a new action to our business plan. So we've done that already. And what you'll see as an ARAC going forward is that there'll be more actions added into the business plan, which you saw earlier in the agenda. So we'll monitor and report it quarterly to ARAC as part of our normal business planning process. What we do need to do as well is add in some of the benchmarking information that HMICS provided in their report. So we'll make sure when we're looking at those milestones that we consider some of the benchmarking in there. And we've also flagged out some of the dependencies that some of these actions have, particularly with Police Scotland. And that's probably the key things to say. We're taking this forward as an SLT, and we'll continue to report on progress quarterly too.
Thank you very much, John. Before I open it up, just want to recognise your own role in this, because not only do you support ARAC throughout the year, but you had to devote a lot of your time to this process of the inspection, and the support you gave to members was invaluable as well. So thank you very much for that. And I know that there will be very careful tracking of the recommendations or the areas for attention, and we'll look forward to receiving quarterly reports on that alongside the business plan. So thank you very much, John, for your contribution on this. Can I open it up to members? Does anyone have any questions or comments for either Lynn or John? Annie.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo both Craig's, Lynn's and John's comments there, just to say that it was a really positive experience, and we're really grateful to all the support that we had from the SPA and Police Scotland in doing this. As John said then, we've had several meetings since the report was published with the SPA, and we're really pleased and encouraged by the response in aligning the AFDs, the areas for development, sorry, to the existing business plan. And that was really encouraging throughout the review, that many of the areas we identified did obviously align with things that you'd already recognised that were needed development, rather than, you know, any big new issues. So just to say, we're really happy with and welcome your approach in responding to the report, and kind of look forward to seeing the progress on those issues as time goes forward. So yeah, just to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie. And Lynn, you wanted to come in?
If I may, Chair, there's no questions from any of the board members. Just to echo what Annie said, that and Craig said it was we want to learn, we want to get better, we want to be the best in comparison to other police authorities. And there's a paper later on where we're starting to test ourselves against that. I'd just like to say that this is, again, it's a whole board effort, it's a whole staff effort in terms of where we have got to. And I think that's based on what was touched on also earlier on, in terms of real clarity in our role and what we should be doing. And I'd like to thank the staff for all their efforts that they have put into. I'm really proud of what they've achieved. And you'll even see today, there's issues, reports today, where we're just continuing that continual improvement. So I just wanted to, from my perspective, add that in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And looking at the rest of the agenda, we've got items on base value and we've got items on benchmarking. All of these are important elements of what we've been discussing this morning. So if there are, oh, sorry, Angela, sorry, I nearly missed your hand there. Oh, sorry, you're still on mute.
That's me now. It just felt, I had to say, well done. I mean, I think both to the inspectorate and to the SPA, I've been on the receiving end of many an inspection, and this is a really, really good report. And I just think there's a lot of learning here that we can take from, and I'm sure that Lynn will testify that the process of going through an audit of this nature is as valuable as the outcome in improving or setting the scene for improvement, change and transformation. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angela. Yeah, my own experience would suggest that this was a better process for everybody involved. I was interviewed for a couple of hours, I think, and it was actually, I hesitate to say, quite an enjoyable discussion, because I knew I was talking to people who knew us inside out as well, but who were genuinely interested in what we were doing, and that was really exceptional. So, moving on, item 4.3 is. No, sorry, 4.4 is the SPA best value update, and that's back to John McNellis.
Thank you, Chair. This is really just an overview, an update report on where we are with our arrangements for best value across SPA, Forensics and Police Scotland, and really just an update on those developing plans for a policing inspection. So really the report goes into a bit of background and context as to best value. And in particular, I've added kind of new illustration on slide 4 of your report, which shows the different legal responsibilities for the accountable officer, as well as the chief constable for best value, and how they overlap in different ways. It can be quite complicated at first to try and understand the different roles, responsibilities across the policing landscape, as well as your own responsibilities as the board and ARAC, and the role for HMICS and the Auditor General. So historically, again, going into timeline, which is on slide 5, there has been no specific inspection of best value since the SPA was created. Now, there used to be best value audits and inspections for the legacy police forces, but there has been nothing specific since the SPA in Police Scotland was created. Our external auditors, that was Audit Scotland and now Grant Thornton, do comment on best value, and they look at that as part of their annual audit reports, which in fact come to this committee. So there are some consideration of best value in those reports, but again, we've had no specific audit to date. However, the Auditor General has now announced that during his current term, there will be an inspection, best value inspection of both police and fire, and it's most likely that the police inspection will happen in 2025, albeit the timescales for that have still to be agreed, and we still to be formally notified of when that will happen and how it will happen. However, it will be a joint inspection with HMICS that will also involve our external auditor, Grant Thornton, as well as the Audit Scotland Best Value and Performance team. So, Chair, I'll just going to touch on where we are with each of the 3 areas of policing. So I'll speak to SPA Corporate, and then I'll pass to my colleagues, Vicky Morton for Forensics, and also Alistair Corfield for Police Scotland, just to give you an update on where each of the areas are. So probably most simple, talking about SPA Corporate for myself. We have quite an established process, as you'll see. We've been taking best value assessments to the ARAC for the last 3 years now, and really that's culminated in the HMICS inspection, which we've obviously just reported on, and that was based on a best value self-assessment. Now, of course, the HMICS work was not a formal best value audit. However, based on what they've just said and the findings from that work, we don't see that there's a need for any significant changes from the SPA Corporate. We'll obviously continue to develop, but we'll take on board some of the feedback that they had during the work. However, that will be just a bit of an evolution on where we are. So no significant changes, and we'll have an updated version of our self-assessment ready for next year's inspection. So if I could maybe pass over to Forensics, to Vicky Morton, Chair.
Great, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Just to build on what John's been saying there, we've obviously got a separate paper under action point, agenda item 4.5 on forensic services. But you can see from the slide, John's pack, slide 7, that forensic services have already been working very closely with SPA Corporate to build on the work that they have done and the experience they have in that self-assessment approach. And we now have very much an agreed process for going forward. What I'd also like to say is that there absolutely is that commitment from the Director of Forensic Services, myself and the wider SMT, that this work is obviously a priority. So our approach very much looks at that diversity of perspectives and expertise. So we're taking forward a series of workshops with our people and obviously partners as well, to really give us that evidence-based approach to the self-assessment itself. You can see on page 5 of my paper, agenda item 4.5, a timeline which has commenced, and we're progressing well in terms of the Q2 activity. Obviously being here today to talk about our approach, and also the communications internally with our staff have already been completed. So we're on track to deliver a final report to ARAC in the spring of next year. So I think I'll pause there, and whether you have any questions at this point or wish to look at the Police Scotland activity.
Apologies, Mary, you're on mute.
Apologies. Thank you, Vicky. We'll move on, but we are coming back to your service in the next item. So passing on now to Alistair Corfield.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've in addition to the page that's in this presentation, I've provided a paper to the committee on the proposals for best value in Police Scotland, the revised proposals indeed. So I'm just going to draw out a couple of things, or the main points from that, if I may. Probably the most important thing is that we have agreed within Police Scotland to change our approach slightly, to use the public service improvement framework to assess best value using self-assessment. So it's still the self-assessment approach, but we are now looking at using probably a more appropriate tool that is linked very closely to the 2020 best value guidance, and that's important. But not only that, it does give us an opportunity to take a holistic view of the best value assurance arrangements within Police Scotland in a timeline that's perhaps more appropriate, given the greater urgency that's now fairly clear from the Auditor General's commitment to undertake a review in most likely next year, and also the lack of progress that we've been able to make in Police Scotland with the recruitment freeze that we talked about at the last meeting. So that move to public service improvement framework, I think, is a very positive move. We are, as I say, looking to do it on self-assessment basis. So the improvement service have offered their support on that, but we are proposing to deliver that internally ourselves. But we clearly have the improvement service sitting on the sidelines, able to support and mentor us as is necessary. The other points I just wanted to raise were that we do have clear support for the best value agenda from the Chief Constable and from DCC Connors. And indeed, we have a slot on the SLB, the Senior Leadership Board, the Chief Constable's own board, on the 11th of September to discuss the best value proposals and to ensure we have the full buy-in there and agree the way forward at that stage. So that's very important to point out. The two other points, recruitment. I think that we talked about that at the last meeting as well, and I've included a slide on that in my paper to the committee. That's underway now. Recruitment, the job adverts are out, and I think there's already some quite encouraging signs. So let's wait and see what that delivers. But there are 4 roles being advertised currently, and that's also an important stage to mention. The final point I just wanted to make was that I've also been given funding, again, to recognise the importance that Best Value has within Police Scotland. I've been given funding from the executive to employ a secondee from BDO, and that's already delivering significant dividends. And I'd just like to put on record my thanks to Claire Robertson for the support that she's provided in that and facilitating that secondment. That's really a very significant move for us as well. So, they were the main points I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you also for the report that you did submit to the committee and was circulated to everyone. That gave us, I think, a very positive update on where we had previously expressed concerns. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
In particular, it is good to know that the recruitment is now underway, although these things take such a long time. I'm sure you wish you could just wave a magic wand and have people in place. But it might be the end of the year or even the beginning of next year before you have your team there and can really, start motoring on. So, but thank you for both reports. We've got one final page of this report to look at, but at the moment we've got Lynn with her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share a sort of concern I have with the committee, and is that you will see from what you've heard today, huge commitment from staff to deliver on this best value inspection. You'll also see that this is a first, it's not been done before, and the timeframes are really tight, particularly in terms of the commitment that the Auditor General has given to the Parliament. So my concern is around the guidance. We don't have guidance yet. And maybe Mr. Naylor, I think you touched on it earlier, might want to say something about that, because my own concern is we go down the wrong track. I don't think we will, because it's really clear the best value themes and they're set out in the presentation. But we need that guidance very quickly, so we really know what we're going to be tested against. So I'd just like to share that with the committee, and maybe Mr. Naylor would like to give a comment.
Yeah, that really is something that's much needed at this stage. Craig, did you want to come in?
Yeah, very happy to come in, Chair. Thank you. And I absolutely echo Lynn's concerns about this issue. We have done work that Annie's been very heavily involved in, along with colleagues from Audit Scotland, to develop a paper. It's currently sitting with the Auditor General and myself, and we're meeting next week to discuss various things, including this, and hope to get something out to you in a suitable period of time, recognising that there isn't any guidance. I go back to the mid-2000s when we had expectation documents aplenty for local authorities, for policing, for health, etc., on best value. All of those have gone, and we are trying to recreate an expectations type document without saying it's an expectations document. We hope to have agreement to that as soon as we can, and then get that out to you as soon as. The other thing I will be speaking to Stephen Boyle about next week is timing. Trying to align inspection teams, audit teams into one space with the guarantees he's given for end of 25 reporting to the Public Audit Committee is a challenge. So we need to figure out the best way to do this, whether it's throwing more resource at it for a shorter period of time, or starting it as soon as we can. The bit for me is the lessons learned from the SPA best value work that we've just gone through. I've really set a good template and way of doing business together, and we will want to continue doing that. So the conversation next week will be fairly instructive in how we go forward. Lynn, I will try and get 5 minutes in your diary after that, just to give you the heads up. I spoke briefly with the Chief Constable last week about it. I'm catching up with Tom McMahon tomorrow to have a bit more detailed conversation about some of the issues that we would be keen to, that the organisation from a strategic perspective are looking at, and then we can be a bit more formal thereafter. So sorry, I'm kind of obfuscating and saying we've got a bit of time to do some work, but we want to get this right and make it as straightforward to capture all the evidence and do it in a way that is representative of everything that's been done across the three organisations. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. No obfuscation. I think we're happy to hear that we'll have this as soon as possible and that's the commitment. So thank you very much for that. Good luck with your discussions on it next week. Right, okay. I think we're able to just complete the consideration of this report. If John wants to say something about the final slide in his slide deck.
Thanks, Chair. I think we've covered that. It really just ticks off the lack of the need for guidance and the timescales.
Okay. So does anyone have any further comments or questions? No. So thank you everybody for that. Thank you, John, Vicky, and Alistair.
I was late.
Sorry, Angela. Sorry. I need better
Apologies.
glasses. I think I can't see people.
No, it was me. It was definitely me. I find this paper really helpful, really useful, and equally reassuring. It is heartening just to hear what Alistair was saying about that commitment at a leadership level, and I think we saw part of that earlier in the paper on leadership that was shared, because that is critical, because it's everybody's duty to ensure best value in any organisation. I just wanted to say that the resource issue, if this is going to be something that's done in 2025, again, in my experience, if we're going to get the value of it, it is really important that we put the resources in at the front end so that the organisation can actually see the impact of some of these improvements throughout the course of the year. And the self-assessment is particularly useful for me anyway, and just reminding staff and board members and so on of all the key elements that are already in the organisation that contribute towards best value. So again, I would just reiterate that the process of going through this is just as important as, you know, what the inspection agencies come up with themselves, because it will drive change. So really welcome the opportunity to give whatever advice as a non-executive that's feasible.
Thank you, Angela. That reminds me that I was planning to ask if you'd be content to offer advice, because you are a lot of us on the board have had experience of best value. We're kind of steeped in it over many years now up here, but your experience is more recent than most. So if you were willing to do that in the same way that Grants supports the annual report and accounts, that would be, I think, very helpful. So Jane, you have your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully I can be heard this time.
Oh yes, yes.
Finally, sorry. Yeah, I think it was just to reiterate the commitment. The importance of the best value audit has been played through to the executive in particular. So we fully support it. It is that guidance that's really key that will drive the necessity resources. But absolutely, it will play a large part in how we do business, and I think it's really important. So it's just to reiterate that about the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. That's helpful. Lynn, did you want to come back in?
No, I was just going to say that I would welcome Angela's sort of analysis of this. I mean, I benefit as a CEO from Grant looking at the annual report and accounts, and sort of delegated to him to get into that deep dive from the committee, because as you can see, this agenda today is so voluminous and detailed. So to have a board member just with that focus on each time this report comes to your committee will be really helpful to me. So thank you.
Thank you. And Angela, I think, is willing to do that. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you know, you've got a lot of work ahead of you in Police Scotland, but there are lots of people who can help, including, for example, you mentioned, Alistair, the improvement service, who have a lot of expertise in all of this. So we'll do what we can to get ourselves in the best possible position. Okay, thank you very much then. The next item is 4.5, and we're back to Vicky again, because this is the Forensic Services Best Value Update.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chair. As I said earlier, this paper really just complements the detail that was in John's report there in the slide on Forensic Services, slide 7. But it gives you a bit more context in terms of our approach there. As I've mentioned, the commitment there from the director and leadership team is absolutely there to take this work forward, and we will really welcome the engagement with yourself, Angela, in terms of that from a forensic perspective. and obviously the detailed guidance and from HMICS and the Auditor General. So just in terms of walking through the paper very briefly, the approach has been agreed internally. There's been really good collaboration with SPA Corporate to really build on their experience through the self-assessment process and the resource there and the commitment to assist us with that programme of work. Slide 5 itself gives you the indicative timelines at this point, with the Q2 activity for 24-25 well underway and moving forward to the actual workshops themselves with our staff and that evidence gathering stage, which is noted for Q3. And that's really one of the key points we wanted to ensure that we delivered through this was that collaborative approach, and was that looking at that the diverse perspectives across different people within our organisation and wider. So with that in mind, we will have a very much an evidence-based approach. As has already been mentioned, we actually look at these activities already through our governance processes, but it's really good to look at it under that whole banner of based value. And with that, I will pause there to see if there's any questions at all.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Yes, I think it looks like you've made a good start, and you know, I'd recognise the commitment from yourself and from Fiona. So I'm sure the work will proceed well. Can I just ask? There's a potential for duplication in some of this, given that you also have a lot of work to do to ensure that you get appropriate accreditation, etc. So how are you making sure that you can avoid that duplication and you can streamline that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Chair. From my perspective, I see it more as we've already got a lot of evidence there through that accreditation in our wider quality management system. So the best value exercise, the self-assessment, will actually pull on that. So I don't really see it as a duplication, but more of here's evidence to support our assessment itself.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is more a question for John, who's able to read across all of these things, but I wonder, is best value easier to evidence for forensics because of the nature of laboratory work than it is it more tangible for forensics than it is perhaps for wider police services?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier, but it's simpler in the sense that there is a relatively, effectively one service. I mean, obviously different strands to that, but yes, within policing, they have a much more difficult job to do because there's so many different services, providers. It's a much more difficult job. It's more akin to what a local authority might go through, as opposed to forensics have a much more confined area to do. So yes, I would say forensics do have a simpler job than the police, and I think that reflects the extra resources that Alistair's outlined that he's looking for to do that exercise.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions in relation to item 4.5, we now have two reports on whistleblowing, and we would welcome to the committee Caroline Stewart, who's an authority member and indeed is our whistleblowing champion on the authority. So welcome, Caroline. I know you've been sitting in on the meeting, and hope you found that enjoyable, but these are the reports you're particularly interested in now. So I'm going to hand over to Stuart Houston for item 4.6, Police Scotland Annual Whistleblowing Report.
Thank you, Chair. The paper is obviously as submitted, and I would maybe start off by saying that the aspect that we've drawn out in the paper this time, it's section 3, covers the volume and demand of what the Professional Standards Gateway deal with overall during the course of the last year. And that's to sort of give a flavour about the volume that they deal with, but what then turns into what would be protected disclosure or whistleblowing outcomes. The report goes into a bit of detail in relation to section 4 about protected disclosures and the changes that we've seen in that over the past year. I think the fact is that we've recorded 25 matters through our system where it's been assessed as protected disclosure under the public interest disclosure Act, that's quite a rise from last year where we had 15. I would note that 9 of these are made anonymously. They're probably quite encouraging for us, and the fact is that it's becoming more accessible to people. They are more comfortable to reach out, and it's probably some confidence in the system that we have seen that rise. What I would also say is that this is coupled with, in addition to this year, part of the year we have seen the introduction of the National Anti-Corruption and Abuse Line, which is UK-wide for policing, where we are in line with all forces. It's administered by Crime Stoppers, and we've seen that introduced as well as another avenue for people. And even though that has been introduced, we've still seen people coming forward for what would be whistleblowing. Some really good developments that we've had over the course of this year, and the fact is about it's that awareness raising to line managers. I'm pretty confident now that our own staff within the Gateway unit who are assessing these as the sole sort of repository for that are well versed in recognising what whistleblowing is and when there's a need for protected disclosure. Really good engagement across all the divisions, with professional standards hold bi-monthly meetings with divisions to ensure that where there is protected disclosure in place, there is oversight and support, not only for the individuals, but also those that may be line managing them as they go along. During the course of this year in June, we had World Whistleblower Day, which we recognised internally within the organisation. And it's that part is about developing a sort of network across other forces and other organisations regarding protected disclosure. And as such, some scoping that's been done with other UK policing is changing the terminology to refresh it to reporting wrongdoing with brackets whistleblowing, and that's just a sort of a consistency across other areas of policing to ensure that we're doing that. We do link in with the fact that the reports that we do publish in relation to the standard, which is our internal outcomes for conduct and PSD matters. We are seeing that this month is just about to be published, will be of a feature on whistleblowing, and that is also reported in through the Complaints and Conduct Committee as well in relation to matters that we record through our publications. So overall, the report, I think it's positive, and the fact is we are seeing that increase in awareness of protected disclosures. The idea that we're recognising it probably a bit more is a positive turn for us. And again, if you look at the volume of demand for PSD Gateway, it is pretty similar to the previous year, but we are seeing that increase in what is whistleblowing cases. So I don't know if there's any further questions, but that's all I would really probably like to cover in the paper.
Thank you, Stuart. Before I open it up for questions, I wondered if Caroline had anything she wanted to add at this stage.
Not so much, Chair. I just wanted to say that I thought the report was very good, and I want to thank Stuart for that. But more importantly, I think the whole point about the holistic view, which is about taking forward lessons learned and putting them back into the business, is hugely valuable and important. So I'm very pleased with the next steps action, and it's that continuous improvement. So yeah, that would be my only points, but thank you.
Yes, I think it's a slow but sure progress on this. So yeah, Grant, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Stuart, thank you very much for the report, and there's no doubt that this increased volume of reporting is clearly a challenge to be able to handle all these things for you. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you feed back either to specific whistleblowers or perhaps anonymous ones about whether what sort of action, if any, you're taking in response to the issues raised.
Thank you for that. I suppose where it is a known, where we have identified the whistleblower and they came forward and provided their details, that is a bit easier, and the fact is we would engage with them to provide an update as we would in any complaint or matter that needs addressed. So that's probably the easier one. When it comes to the anonymous ones and the ones that we've seen recently, it could be practice or procedure within areas or departments. It's about making sure that we publish a change in procedure and ensure that that's highlighted, and we have seen that on a number of occasions. That can be quite difficult, but I think it's about, it's been touched on, it's about showing that continuous improvement and learning, and the use of the publication of the standard to say, here's the actions that we take when someone comes forward with something that wrongdoing piece, that we can act upon it.
Thank you. That's very reassuring, because I think one of the things that will encourage people to have whistleblowing contributions is to see that it does have an impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Grant. Paul.
Yeah, can I ask you, the 25 whistleblowing submissions, how many of those have been upheld?
So again, that's at this moment in time, going through that this year, that's work. A lot of those are still work in progress, I would say, for over the past year. I don't have the final number for some of those, and some of them are actually cases that have developed into other matters and have been subject of other misconduct aspects. So I don't have the final numbers for that, but it's maybe something that we could maybe follow up with the next year's report about how we've resolved those matters from the year previously. But I can take that on.
And it would be useful also to know how quickly you managed to resolve them as well. So I get some of these are extraordinarily complicated, but it would still be useful to know. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, and I think, as we said earlier, there has been clearly continuous improvement in this since the earliest days of whistleblowing. But obviously what we would like as a committee is explicit assurance that the current arrangements are working well and they're being effective. So, you know, we work towards that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your report, Stuart, and thank you, Caroline, for coming along. If you don't mind staying for the next item, which is the SPA annual whistleblowing report. And I think that's back to John McNellis, is it? Am I making that up?
John McLean, I think.
John McLean. I knew it was John.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll take the paper as read, but just to highlight, this is a report that's for the full of SPA, corporate and forensics. It follows the standard structure we've used over the last couple of years, a few years, in relation to the annual report, where we look at the policy assurance process, case learning, ongoing plans for improvement, assessment against good practice, and then an assessment of the effectiveness of the procedures or the process itself. So just to call out specifically in this year, we have focused specifically on embedding and implementing the training package to support and increase knowledge and confidence around about the raising of concerns. Specifically with SPA Corporate, as we've done for the last 3 years, we continue to measure the knowledge and confidence, and that's particularly important for ourselves because of the size of the organisation. Our whistleblowing numbers will always be quite low, so it's difficult to determine whether low is good or bad. So we really need to understand the level of confidence people have to raise concerns in the first place. An area that's been of interest to the committee for several years has been how do we ensure the measurement of that across policing. And it's positive to note that the staff survey that's open just now that applies to SPA, Police Scotland, and so Corporate and Forensics and Police Scotland asks specific questions around about concerns, the confidence to raise concerns, which captures a discussion we had in our last annual report. And just to highlight that on looking at across all of this, the report concludes an assessment of effectiveness this year, recognising the need for continuous improvement and further improvements planned into 24-25.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much, John. That's really helpful. And I think waiting for the results of the staff survey should hopefully give us even more confidence in all of this. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Caroline, you comfortable?
Yes, Chair, very comfortable. I think another very pleasing report. Good to see the staff sort of survey that was done there, the highlights of that. But more importantly, again, it's back to that institutional learning, the holistic view that if things arise, that we are doing something about it, embedding that into best practice going forward. So yeah, very pleasing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is again fits in with the HMICS report, which is about continual improvement, and you can see that with this whistleblowing report itself. It develops in terms of what committee you want to be reassured on. One thing is I'm reassured on it, and you look at the measurement of knowledge and confidence related to whistleblowing, and for the SPA corporate, 2022, the question of you had a whistleblowing concern, would you be confident to raise it? Was it 25.5%? Strongly agree, and that's gone up to 50%. And again, that's down to the publication around the whistleblowing policy and how things should be treated. So as a CEO, I'm pleased that we are definitely making progress in this really important area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's an area that is considered a priority within the SPA, so I'm glad to see the report. So thank you very much, John. We can move on to the final item under section 4 of the report, which is a report on the corporate benchmarking activity within the SPA. And we've got Amanda.
Thanks, Chair.
Sorry,
Amanda, probably hiding on the second screen, Chair.
Yeah, I think so.
Taking the report as read, just a few words of introduction, and obviously this paper has already been referenced in discussion by committee today in relation to the HMICS review of SPA corporate. But just as a bit of background to this report for members, in strategic outcome 5 of our corporate strategy, we are clear that we want to be a learning organisation and that we want our decision making and scrutiny to be evidence led. As part of that commitment, we've put in place a programme of benchmarking as a corporate organisation, looking to gain and share insights into our functions against similar oversight and scrutiny bodies in the UK. So this report summarises the work we've delivered in year 1 of the programme, where we sought to understand an overall data set, identifying organisations which were most comparable to us as an authority and on which factors. And you'll see in paragraph 2.5 of the paper that 15 police and oversight bodies agreed to share data with us for benchmarking purposes, and an additional 3 non-policing bodies agreed to participate. From this data gathering exercise, we've been working to identify what we would define as most similar groups, that is those organisations which are most comparable to us on key relevant factors, and that most similar group cohort might be different depending on the query area that we're looking at. So from the data that we've had returned from this initial exercise, we've been able to provide comparison of the authority against others, and that's shown in Appendix 2 to the report. And we now have further work underway to understand the ratios that are presented in Appendix 2 and provide some insights which might inform our learning and strengthen our approach to comparing against most similar groups. And then finally, in introduction, Chair, as outlined in section 5 of the report, we're progressing into year 2 of our benchmarking approach with a focus on 2 key areas identified through internal discussion, which support the authority's governance review around board and committee effectiveness. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's very helpful reports. It's good to see that the work's kicked off so well and such progress in the first year of doing this. So thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment before Grant comes in with his question. This is from a standing start, this corporate, and I was delighted in the response that Amanda and her team got from those other policing authorities. A lot of that's also to do with the relationships we have with them, going back to the HMICS report, relationships that we have with these authorities. They were happy to come in and talk to us and share the data, so I really welcome that. Again, from a standing start, I think this is a really good bit of work, and we will develop it going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly is. Thank you, Lynn. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. Really following on from what Lynn has just said, I'm very, as someone who's been promoting the use of benchmarking data for some time, I'm delighted to see this moving forward now, and look forward to learning how this can be further developed in due course. But well done, and thank you, Amanda, for the very great clarity of your report.
Yes, thank you, Grant. And I think particularly interested in your phase 2 survey, and it's a small number of potential comparators, but they are very good comparators when you look at the information in the report about how similar they are. So that would be a very interesting aspect of the exercise. So thank you, and good luck with the rest of this then, Amanda. Thanks very much. Oh, sorry, Jane. has her hand up. Sorry, DCC Connors.
Sorry, Chair, a little bit late. It was just to complement the range of people that have been consulted with and have given feedback, and actually Police Scotland will benefit from that scrutiny and that benchmarking. So again, I just think it's a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Thank you very much. So we're moving on now to item 5. And the first item 5.1 is committee priorities and outcomes. This report does two things. It looks at what the committee has been focused on over the last year, but also looks at what could be potential priority areas of focus for us going forward. So the first slide gives a summary of the key business that we've reported to the authority board after each committee meeting. And none of this will be of news to anybody. It's a summary of the things that we've reported in on. There's also a note that over the 5 meetings we held last year, how many of our reports were in public and in private. And we obviously try to minimise the number of private reports. But as Craig Naylor highlighted earlier, where we do have to take something in private, we would try to make that understood. So these have been our areas of focus. These have been the matters that we've reported on and that we've had regular reports to committee on. But looking forward, we're obviously looking to see what we can do more of, or do better, or give more attention to going forward. And so we have priority areas of focus in 2024 to 2026, so over the next 2-3 years. I'm suggesting that these should be best value, risk management and tracking of improvement recommendations to ensure completion. That seems to me to be the areas where we've been particularly focused recently, but where we could be doing more, and we could be reporting on more successes in these areas. Best value clearly is very much on our agenda for the next year. And then looking with particular interest at next year and some target outcomes. Again, I'm suggesting that best value is one, so that we can ensure that we have got adequate arrangements in place. That risk management is another, so that we have a focus on the risks that are out with appetite and tolerance, and where we can hopefully reduce the number of risks that we have and the significance of those risks. And then finally, looking at historic improvement recommendations, focus on ensuring that old or past due recommendations from scrutiny bodies are being progressed. And I would suggest adding in there, if not progressed, then discharged or withdrawn. And I think that reflects the conversation we had earlier. So that would be my recommendation to the committee. Hopefully everybody is comfortable with that. That will be what I would report to the board at the next meeting. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Next item then is 5.2, the committee work plan, a dynamic document that's constantly being updated, and Karen will keep us right on it, but it's just really for noting. So if members are comfortable to move on from that, we have finished with the public items of business now, and we'll move into what I think could be a fairly short private session, but I would suggest that we take